Arata Hinohara was a deeply depressed high school student. At one point, he was a promising athlete, but everything changed after he was betrayed by his best friend from elementary school. Since then, the trauma of that event had lived permanently in his mind, preventing him from living a fulfilling life. However, his life changes drastically when he switches places with someone from a parallel world and is immediately thrown into a battle where only the victor can survive. That situation forces him to confront his fears, and he eventually becomes one of the strongest heroes in his new world. Before that, Arata had been a coward. The constant humiliation from Masato, his childhood friend, had destroyed him emotionally. Even so, he had begun to regain a little joy thanks to the new friends he made in high school. However, everything fell apart when he overheard his new best friend telling some bullies that he had never actually been friends with Arata. His heart was shattered once again, and he lost all faith in people. From that moment on, Arata decided he would never trust anyone again and wished only to disappear from this world. In another universe, a boy with the same name, Arata, was running away from home. His grandmother kept insisting that he stop running and accept his destiny. However, Arata refused to pretend to be a woman, arguing that dressing like a girl didn't suit him. Angered by his insolence, his grandmother attacked him with magic, throwing him into the sea. He was rescued, but when he woke up, his grandmother told him that he had no choice. He had to live as a woman and become the next ruling princess of the kingdom. The reason was that the kingdom had always been ruled by a princess with magical powers, and the chosen one had to come from the Hinohara clan. Since no girl had been born into the family for decades, the grandmother declared that Arata had been a girl since birth in order to preserve the lineage. Arata tried to argue that only women could use magic in that world, which made it impossible for him to take on the role of princess. However, his grandmother explained that if he refused, the entire clan would be exterminated for failing to fulfill its duty, and she pressured him to swallow his pride and accept the mission to save the family and protect the clan's divine weapon. Reluctantly, Arata picked up a rusty sword, saying it was nothing more than an old piece of iron and not a divine weapon. His grandmother grew furious but suddenly suffered a stroke. Faced with the situation, Arata saw no other choice and decided to act as a woman to save his clan. The next day, he boarded a carriage alongside his personal servant, Kotoha, who explained that the princess's role was to subdue the gods who resided within the kingdom's magical swords. The current princess had ruled for 60 years and was now very old. Kotoha tried to cheer Arata up by giving him a good luck charm she had received from a former princess, Kikuri. The gesture comforted Arata, who decided to do his best to fool Kikuri and the guards. Upon arriving in the capital, Arata was taken to a massive tower where the princess lived. At the top, he found the shrines of the 12 guardians, the strongest and most loyal warriors of the princess. To his surprise, Princess Kikuri wasn't an elderly woman as he had imagined, but a young and gentle one. Though he began to trust her, everything changed when one of the guardians, Kanagi, attacked her during the ceremony. Kikuri tried to defend herself with magic, but was too weak to cause any harm. Before fainting, she used her remaining energy to preserve her own body. During the chaos, Arata let his real voice slip, revealing that he was a man. Kanagi, however, had already planned to kill the next princess, so the fact that Arata was male didn't matter. Desperate, Arata begged the guardians for help, only to discover that they were all traitors. Kanagi attacked him, and Arata managed to escape by jumping into a nearby lake. Meanwhile, Kanagi mobilized the army, spreading the news that the princess had been murdered by an imposter. Fleeing, Arata ran through the city until he reached the Ka Forest, a place feared for transforming anyone who dared to enter it. As he ran, Arata thought about the traitorous guardians when, suddenly, he began hearing someone call his name. At that moment, he and the Arata from the other world found themselves floating in the sky for a brief instant before switching places. Arata found himself in the forest, confused about where he was and what had happened. As he left the forest, he spotted the tower in the distance, but an arrow narrowly grazed him. Kotoha and a few soldiers were there to capture him, as he looked identical to the Arata from the other world. Desperate, Arata sought shelter among the trees that blocked the enemy's arrows, but suddenly, he was teleported somewhere else. Kotoha appeared out of nowhere and attacked him, believing he was the other Arata. She was relieved to see him unharmed and grabbed his hand, ignoring his questions as she led him to the village. When they arrived, Kotoha told Arata's grandmother that Princess Kikuri had been murdered and that everyone believed Arata was responsible. The grandmother was horrified, but Kotoha added that he had also lost his memory after entering the dreaded Ka forest. Nervous, the grandmother took Arata to a secret basement, where he revealed that he was from another world. Surprisingly, she believed him, as there was an ancient legend that said anyone who returned from the Ka forest was never the same, for they had switched places with someone from another universe. Shocked, Arata asked if it was possible to return to his own world, but the grandmother insisted that he must now live as Arata. Arata refused, claiming he didn't want to be seen as a criminal. The grandmother insisted that her grandson would never commit such a terrible crime. As Arata struggled to accept this new reality, Kotoha's screams echoed from outside. The grandmother ran to see what was happening and found Kanagi holding Kotoha hostage. He demanded that they hand over Arata, threatening to kill the girl if they didn't obey. The grandmother said she didn't know where he was, but Kanagi tortured Kotoha, asking if she was willing to die for a criminal. Kotoha shouted that she believed in Arata's innocence, and her words deeply moved him. Arata realized he couldn't allow someone else's faith to be destroyed and decided to intervene. He stepped out to confront Kanagi, who tossed Kotoha aside and ordered his soldiers to take Arata down. As Arata stumbled, he spotted the rusty sword on the ground and picked it up to defend himself. As he wielded it, a dormant power within the weapon awakened, astonishing both Arata and the grandmother. Kanagi, however, underestimated the sword, believing that a divine weapon would be useless in the hands of an ordinary person. He attacked Arata with the fiery power of his own sword. Terrified, Arata followed his grandmother's instructions and asked the god within the sword to manifest. Suddenly, a golden barrier appeared around him, absorbing Kanagi's flames. Everyone was stunned, especially Kanagi, who decided to restrain his weapon's power. He declared that it was impossible for Arata to be a chosen one, but before he could act, the damaged ceiling of the house collapsed. As the soldiers searched through the debris, they found no trace of Arata or the others. Frustrated, Kanagi was visited by another of the 12 guardians, Akachi, who informed him of a change in plans. Now they wanted to capture Arata alive, put him on public trial, and use him as an example for their rebellion. In the modern world, Arata's mother and sister were worried, trying to call him but with no success. However, they noticed a crowd of people talking about a handsome, shirtless man walking down the streets. Arata's mother, being a bit perverted, decided to take a look, only to discover that the man was none other than the Arata from the other world, who to her looked exactly like her son. Back in the other world, Arata and the others were hiding in a cave. The grandmother explained that the gods of that world resided within the divine weapons, and only the chosen ones could control them and command the gods' power. Now Arata was one of those chosen ones. Later, Kotoha tried to help Arata regain his memories by offering him the favorite food of the other Arata. He felt guilty upon realizing how much she wanted her master to return, and tried to explain that he was a different person. Kotoha seemed to believe his words but suddenly hugged him from behind, insisting that she was sure her master would come back. Flustered, Arata tried to pull away, but Kotoha noticed that the good luck charm she had given the other Arata was missing. Though upset, she handed him another one. At that moment, Arata began to open up to her, but Kanagi appeared, already having taken the grandmother hostage. Kanagi demanded that Arata surrender or face him. Fearing the worst, the grandmother forbade Arata from using his weapon, so he agreed to be taken prisoner. Kanagi placed him in a carriage and declared that he would be judged for the princess's murder. Arata protested, saying he didn't know what they were talking about, but Kanagi ignored him, assuming he had lost his memory in the forest. While imprisoned, Arata fell into despair until the charm began to glow and projected an image on the cell wall, showing the Arata from the other world in his bedroom. The boys were completely shocked by what they saw, and Arata tried to return to his room through the portal but ended up hitting his head against a wooden carriage. Finally, both Aratas realized and accepted that they had switched worlds. Arata asked the other why he had killed the princess, and he replied that he had been framed for a crime committed by Kanagi with the complicity of the 12 guardians. The Arata from the other world also says that the princess looked devastated when she was betrayed by those who were supposed to protect her, and he swears that he will never forgive them. Arata is shocked by the revelation, but decides to trust the other Arata. The Arata from the other world then asks about Kotoha and the grandmother, wanting to know if they are safe, and Arata replies that they haven't been captured. Relieved, the other Arata asks him to take care of them. Arata also reveals that the divine weapon has awakened, which excites the other Arata, since now there's a chance to fight against the 12 guardians. They promise each other that they will find a way to restore normalcy, but suddenly the portal begins to shrink. At that moment, Arata's mother walks into his room in the modern world. Arata tries to call out to her, but it's no use. The portal closes completely. The next day, a grand tribunal is assembled to decide Arata's fate. The 12 guardians act as prosecutors and witnesses, accusing Arata of murdering the princess while disguised as a woman. They show an image of the princess on the verge of death, enraging the jury. Immediately, everyone calls for the death penalty without any proper trial. However, Sid interrupts and declares that the 12 guardians failed to protect the princess and are deeply saddened by it. Arata bursts out in anger upon hearing those words, shouting for Sid to stop lying. He accuses the 12 guardians of being traitors and murderers far worse than history will ever tell, asking if they felt no remorse when they attacked the princess who trusted them with her life. Suddenly, the warrior Akachi hurls his spear at Arata and accuses him of lying about the guardians harming the princess, insisting that they are still mourning her loss. Other elite warriors repeat the same story, though theatrically and unconvincingly, but manage to sway the jury. Cornered, Arata remembers being bullied back in school and gives up defending himself. He is sentenced to exile on the prison island of Gia instead of being executed, because Kanagi wants him to remain alive until he finds a divine weapon strong enough to surpass his own sword. Arata is placed on a prison ship and taken away. Shortly after, Kotoha is thrown into his cell, having been caught trying to sneak onto the ship. The guard informs them that she too will be exiled to Katoya along with her man. Arata doesn't care as long as she's with him and discovers that she managed to hide her bag and his sword. Arata believes he can break through the prison walls using his divine sword. He tries to summon its power, but nothing happens, and frustrated, he gives up. Suddenly, his good luck charm begins to glow, and both he and Kotoha are lifted into the sky. The spirit of Princess Kakuri appears before them and declares Arata as her new guardian. She reveals that his words during the trial moved her deeply, giving her hope for a better future for the kingdom. Kikuri explains that until now, she had been using her power to contain the gods within the divine weapons, allowing their strength to be used for the good of the realm. However, if she dies, the divine weapons will be set free, and the warriors who wield them will be consumed by their own ambitions, plunging the world into chaos. Because of that, she entrusts Arata with the mission of restoring the kingdom. To do so, he must bring his divine sword to Kikuri's body before the little life she has left fades away. Arata hesitates, claiming he's just a weak and incapable boy, but Kikuri insists that only he can fulfill this task. Suddenly, Arata returns to the prison in a flash of light. He wonders if he can really accomplish what the princess asked of him. Kotoha reassures him that Kikuri believes in him, just as she does. She explains that as a chosen one, he can store the divine sword within his body. Arata finds that surprisingly convenient and stores the sword in his hand. Meanwhile, the ship arrives at the prison island of Katoya, which looks like something straight out of a dystopian movie. The guards throw Arata and Kotoha among other criminals. Arata shields Kotoha from the hateful glares of the prisoners, who curse him as the princess's murderer. The atmosphere is grim and threatening, until two rowdy boys show up claiming to be the prison bosses. They demand that Arata hand over all his belongings and begin flirting with Kotoha. Taking advantage of the distraction, Arata tries to escape, but the red-haired boy named Ken notices and attacks him. Ken injures Arata's hand and knocks him down, asking how someone so weak could have possibly killed the princess. Before Arata can explain his innocence, the prison begins to shake. The inmates panic, screaming about the hour of judgment. Everyone flees, including Ken, without finishing the fight. Suddenly, enormous hollow tubes begin to move and suck up two people. The prison falls into complete silence. Arata is confused, wondering what's going on. A woman approaches and tells him that it all began with the actions of the warden, Suba, who commands the prison. Every day he chooses two prisoners and devours them. The moment everyone knows as the hour of judgment. The woman then steals a hairpin from Kotoha, saying that's the price for sharing such information, and walks away. Soon after, Arata tries to escape the prison using his sword. He tries to invoke its power, but it's completely useless. Meanwhile, Kotoha finds a warm corner for Arata and offers to massage his back. He refuses, but she notices his wound and heals it with magic. Curious, Arata asks about it, and Kotoha reveals that she comes from a family of attendants, and the women of her lineage possess the power to protect their masters. She uses her magic on Arata's head to help him relax. In that moment, Arata understands how devoted Kotoha is to her master, the reason she followed him even into prison. He thanks her, but suddenly the prison begins to shake again, and the ground beneath Kotoha gives way, making her fall to the lower level. Arata panics, unable to move, and tries to find her, asking the other prisoners if anyone has seen her, but no one answers. Some inmates start chasing him, wanting to capture the princess's killer. Arata hides from them and suddenly runs into the same woman who had approached him before. She introduces herself as Owen and says there are rumors that whoever kills the princess's murderer will be allowed to go home, though she doesn't believe it's true. She asks about the girl who was with Arata and whether he knows where she is. Arata, offering his bag as payment for information, learns that the red-haired boy named Ken took Kotoha. Owen then gives him the information for free, admitting she knows what it feels like to lose someone important. She urges him to hurry, since Ken is known for being a serious troublemaker. Meanwhile, Ken and his younger brother Jin are acting like obedient puppies around Kotoha. She thanks them for saving her when she fell, and soon Jin runs off to leave his brother alone with her. However, Ken doesn't know what to do with her and ends up leaving her alone. Later, he finds Jin unconscious with Arata beside him. Believing Arata had attacked his brother, Ken flies into a rage and attacks. Arata tries to explain the situation, but Ken won't listen, forcing him to draw his sword. At that moment, Jin wakes up and tells his brother that Arata isn't the enemy. Suddenly, a criminal rushes at Ken to attack him, but Arata knocks the man down with a kick. Ken recognizes the attacker as a member of a rival gang, and Jin explains that the gang had attacked them and stolen his ring, but Arata saved him. Ken asks Arata to look after Jin while he goes to take revenge and get the ring back. Arata brings Jin to a room where he tells his story while Koto attends to him. Jin reveals that he was kidnapped by thieves and forced to join them, and that's where he met Ken. They quickly became like brothers, but when the gang fell into chaos, they threatened the two boys and sent them to prison. Jin's ring was the only keepsake from his mother, and Ken promised that they would escape the prison and go home together. After that, Arata and Kotoha finally get a chance to talk alone. Arata says he's ready to help the princess and that the first thing they need to do is find a way out of prison. Jin, however, says that's impossible, since the warden Suba is a chosen one with a divine weapon and they can't defeat him. At that moment, Ken appears with Jin's ring, thanking Arata for saving his brother, but then challenges him to another fight. He believes that hunting Arata is the key to escaping the prison island. However, before they can do anything, the hour of judgment begins. A hollow tube descends and takes Ken, while another targets Arata. Arata freezes in fear, but Jin pushes him so that he goes with his brother. Shaken by his inability to move in time to save anyone, Arata finds courage in Jin's actions and decides to rescue the two brothers. He follows the massive tubes rising upward, believing he'll find them there, knowing it will be dangerous. Then he promises to protect Kotoha no matter what. Meanwhile, Ken and Jin are on the upper level, trapped inside thick iron tubes. They struggle to break free, but the tubes tighten around them. Suba declares that he will judge them for their sins and gives them the chance to fight to the death, promising to free the winner. Ken refuses to fight his brother, but Suba insists, saying that if they don't, both will die. He throws them into the arena and hands them weapons. Jin doesn't want to fight, but Ken grabs his weapon and begins attacking him. Arata and Kotoha arrive just in time to see Ken attacking Jin. Arata jumps into the arena and demands that Suba stop this madness immediately. The cruel warden replies that he won't let anyone interfere with his idea of justice. He attacks Arata with the tubes, but Arata dodges and tells him the boys aren't bad people. Suba points at Ken, who's furiously attacking Jin, and says he's no longer his brother. Those words make Arata remember the betrayal of his best friend. Suddenly, Ken leaps toward Jin to strike him, and Arata instinctively swings his weapon, knocking him away. As Ken falls, he recalls the moment he first met Jin in the thieves' den. Jin had been torn from his family and was crying uncontrollably, but Ken promised he would take him back to his mother, trying to calm him down. Now, all Arata can do is hope that Jin survives and escapes. He realizes that Ken sacrificed himself for his brother. However, instead of freeing Jin, Suba traps him, claiming that he's a criminal for attempted murder. Arata becomes furious when he realizes Suba was only toying with his emotions. Consumed by anger, he draws his sword and slashes through the tubes to free Jin. Suddenly, a massive tube attacks Arata, and he grabs onto it. Arata plummets from the top, dragged violently downward, but somehow manages to hold on. Everyone around witnesses the struggle, and Suba questions how Arata can face him when he doesn't even know how to use his weapon. Kotoha shouts Arata's name, and in that moment, he remembers his promise to always protect her. He calls upon his divine weapon to reveal its true power. Suddenly, a golden light radiates from his sword, dazzling everyone in the prison. Arata finds himself surrounded by a golden barrier, and the tubes around him begin to disintegrate. As he approaches Suba, the warden attacks with all his might, but a single strike from Arata neutralizes the blow and reveals the warden's true body, which had been hidden beneath the island all along. Suba is, in fact, an old man with tubes protruding from his body and a black weapon lodged in his stomach. Seeing the man suffering, Arata tries to free him, but when he grabs the black sword, he's flooded with visions of Suba's past. Once, Suba had been a kind and compassionate man, treating criminals with understanding and encouraging them to reflect on their mistakes and change their ways. However, a man he trusted betrayed him, believing that Suba looked down on him. The traitor attacked him, threw him into a volcano, and then drove the divine weapon into his body. After that betrayal, Suba succumbed to darkness, turning into a demon. Tubes began sprouting from his body, killing the traitor and transforming the prison. Suba's twisted mind decided never to trust anyone again, and he used his power to imprison everyone, creating his own personal hell. Arata finally understands what drove Suba to become like this, but the old warden still believes Arata could never truly comprehend him. Suba begs Arata to end his life, and the prisoners all begin to chant for Arata to kill him. But instead, Arata holds his sword and tries to pull the black weapon out of Suba. The sword's dark aura begins to spread, invading Arata's mind and filling him with rage and hatred toward those who betrayed him. Arata screams in anguish as tears stream down his face, but he swears to save Suba no matter the cost. With great effort, he yanks out the sword and collapses to his knees. The old warden asks why Arata went so far to save him. Arata replies that, just like him, he was betrayed and hurt, but still wants to trust people and help them. Arata's words move Suba deeply, and he thanks him for freeing him from the darkness. The sword then returns to its original form, and Suba reveals that it contains the god Senua. From there, Suba begins to disintegrate and merges with the sword, which explodes into a wave of golden energy. Suba tells Arata that he now entrusts his power to him and asks that he wield the sword with justice. The golden energy flows into Arata's sword, transforming it into the Senua sword. With its power, Arata releases his energy, and the prison begins to transform as everyone watches in awe. The people who had been taken during the hour of judgment are brought back to life, and everyone rejoices. At that moment, Ken arrives looking for Arata. He had seen the golden light in the sky and began questioning the other prisoners about what happened. Suba's voice warns Arata of the danger, telling him to flee while appearing in spectral form before Kotoha. Kotoha realizes that the old warden has been defeated, and in his spiritual form, Suba reveals that Arata is strong and now wields the divine sword. He explains that this sword is the sword of origins, which will rule over the world. Meanwhile, Ken and Jin take Arata to the boat they used to live on and use it to escape the island. On the other side, the Arata from the other world continues living as usual, carefree, even while staying in the original Arata's house. His family worries about him, as the doctor diagnosed him with temporary amnesia. His father suggests he stay home for a few days, but his mother disagrees, saying they must be wise and brave enough to understand and support their son. At that moment, the Arata from the other world comes downstairs, saying his body feels stiff because he hasn't been out hunting in a while. Everyone is shocked, but his parents try to act understanding, while his sister is already fed up with the situation. Meanwhile, in the fantasy world, Ken returns to his territory, still thinking about Suba's words regarding Arata's sword of origins. Not far away, Arata and his group barely make it to an island after their boat is destroyed halfway through the journey. They check the map, and Ken says they're still far from the capital. To get there, they'll have to cross through Kagura's territory. Curious, Arata asks about it, and Kotoha explains that the 12 guardians rule over the 12 domains of the kingdom. And without the princess to reign, each one has gone back to ruling their own land. The group spots smoke in the distance, and as they approach, they find a few ordinary people camping in the forest. Jin recognizes them as villagers from his hometown and runs toward them. They recognize him too, and Jin tells everyone it's safe to come out now. At that moment, his mother steps out of the tent, overcome with emotion at seeing her son again. They embrace tightly, and soon Ken and the others approach. Jin tells his mother how Ken saved him, and she thanks him. Ken responds humbly, saying it was nothing, though his heart feels heavy, afraid of losing Jin again. Meanwhile, Arata talks with the villagers and learns that a war may break out soon, since the 12 guardians have returned to rule their respective territories, all of them ambitious and craving more power. Because of that, the villagers are fleeing to distant lands, far from the conflict. Arata wonders what will happen next, and Ken explains that one of the 12 guardians will rise and become king. He recalls the past, when the guardians were constantly at war, but the princess managed to suppress the chaos and brought peace to the kingdom. Jin and the villagers prepare to continue their journey, and Arata and his friends accompany them to say goodbye. They arrive at a waterfall that nearly dries up every month, revealing the entrance to a hidden passage. The villagers bid farewell to Arata and Kotoha, wishing them luck. Jin also says goodbye to Arata and Kotoha, then calls for Ken to come with him, but Ken refuses. As the waterfall's flow grows stronger, Jin's mother takes him away, and Jin wonders what's happening. However, Ken smiles and tells him to live happily with his mother until they meet again. The waterfall returns to its full strength, and the passage closes. Jin bursts into tears. Arata asks Ken why he did that, and Ken replies that it was his gang who kidnapped Jin, so he has no right to be with his family. He asks Arata and Kotoha to go their own way, because he now wishes to be alone. However, Arata grabs Ken's hand and says he's coming with them. Despite his reluctance, Ken decides to follow. Their journey continues, and the group decides to take a short break. Suddenly, a huge monster appears, frightening Arata. The creature lets out a thunderous roar and begins chasing them. They run and stumble, and the monster charges past them without realizing they're hiding underneath. Once they're safe, the group notices movement in the bushes and finds a girl holding the egg of the same monster they just saw. The monster finds them again, and everyone starts running. Ken reacts last, so the creature chases after him while the others manage to escape. Arata asks the girl, named Ino, why she stole the monster's egg when it could be dangerous. She explains that her master is about to have a baby, and she wanted to give the giant egg to her to help nourish her. Suddenly, the baby monster inside the egg begins breaking the shell, and Ino looks disappointed that she can't do anything anymore. At that moment, Ino's master, Ohika, arrives riding a strange horse, and Ken soon appears behind him. Ken says that this man saved him, and Arata thanks Ohika. However, shortly after, Arata develops a high fever and collapses. When he wakes up, he finds himself inside Ohika's house with Ken at his side. Ohika's wife appears with new clothes for Arata and is relieved to see he's awake. After that, Arata checks his belongings and finds his cell phone among them. He immediately looks at it, trying to hide it from Ken, as if avoiding an annoying cousin who wants to see if there are games on it. Arata turns the phone on, and luckily, it still works. The last message is from Shigaru, his new friend who had ultimately betrayed him. Arata becomes a bit melancholic for a moment, but then Ken remembers something important. He says that the man named Ohika is actually a servant of Kugura, and if he discovers their true identities, they could be in serious danger. Arata panics upon hearing this, but just then, Ohika walks into the room holding a divine weapon. He uses its power to repair Ken's damaged spear, and seeing Arata's reaction, tells him that not all divine weapons are meant for destruction. He explains that he dislikes war, but thanks to Kugura's kindness, his region has remained prosperous. Meanwhile, Kugura is at home visiting the grave of someone very dear to him. He promises her that he will become king and take the throne in her name. Just then, a soldier rushes to him with news that one of his closest servants has been attacked. Kugura hurries there and finds the entire house slaughtered, learning from one of his surviving servants that it was Ohika who carried out the attack. Kugura is shocked since Ohika was one of his dearest friends. He learns that other servants were attacked as well and decides to head to Ohika's village to at least try to save him. Meanwhile, in the village, everything seems peaceful. Ohika had heard about the impending war, but he had no intention of taking part in it as he despised bloodshed. Arata comments on how stupid it is for people to kill each other just to climb the hierarchy, but Ohika explains that killing isn't necessary to become king. If someone can make the other chosen warriors submit to him, he can unite all the divine weapons and become king without spilling a single drop of blood. Arata then realizes the true meaning behind Ohika's words. He understands that this is exactly what Soba had done. Coincidentally, Ohika had heard about that as well. Arata becomes tense, fearing that his secret has been discovered. Ohika then mentions that the person who murdered the princess was also a chosen one who escaped from prison. He says that if the story about Suba making everyone surrender is true, that man was actually framed. Ohika explains that Suba's divine weapon, Samua, can see the true nature of anyone. Therefore, it would never submit to a criminal. Ohika then turns slightly, implying that he knows who that person really is. Before anything else can happen, a maid interrupts, announcing that a visitor is waiting for Ino. The maid quickly arranges for Arata and the group to leave at once, because the visitor in her house is Akachi. Without hesitation, Arata and his friends sneak into the meeting room, where they overhear Akachi telling Ohika that it was Kogura who killed the princess. He places all the blame on Kogura, claiming that he was the mastermind behind the assassination and that he's using Arata to divert attention. Akachi then reveals his true goal. He wants Ohika to become his servant instead of continuing as an assassin. Ohika replies that he doesn't believe what Akachi is saying, and even if it were true, he remains loyal to Kogura and will follow in his footsteps, regardless of the sins he may have committed. In response, Akachi draws his divine spear and drives it into the ground, creating spikes of earth that don't harm Ohika, but hold his pregnant wife hostage. Ohika demands to know why Akachi is doing this, since he doesn't need his help to become king. Akachi replies that he's doing it because he desires all the divine weapons, and he's already taken the weapons of Kogura's other 6 servants. He then asks Ohika whether he'll let his wife die or surrender peacefully. Arata is horrified to hear how far Akachi is willing to go to achieve his goals. He almost draws his weapon, but Ohika, realizing the situation, declares that he will surrender. However, he demands that Akachi promise not to harm his wife or the guests. Akachi agrees, and Ohika raises his weapon in submission. His body transforms into energy and flows into Akachi's sword, which now holds Ohika's divine weapon as well. Ohika's wife weeps as she realizes she has lost her husband, and everyone present is left in shock. At that moment, 2 servants rush into the room, but Akachi kills them without hesitation. Ohika's wife begs him to at least spare her, but he mercilessly kills her too. Arata is enraged, calling Akachi a demon. Suddenly, the curtain is sliced open, and Arata realizes that Akachi has already sensed his presence. He prepares to attack him, but at that instant, Kogura appears, devastated by the massacre before his eyes. He demands to know how Akachi could do something so horrific. Akachi replies that the war to become king has begun, and that he'll stop at nothing to claim the throne. Overcome with fury, Kogura unleashes his fiery power against Akachi, who blocks the attack with a wall of stone. In the next instant, Kogura leaps from above to strike again, but Akachi blocks that blow as well. He then sends spikes of rock hurtling toward Kogura, who manages to dodge only a few. One of the spikes nearly hits him, but instead damages his sword. Akachi continues his assault with a rain of boulders, and Kogura tries to defend himself with a wall of fire. However, Akachi attacks from behind, sending them both crashing to the ground. The collision of their weapons releases a powerful shockwave that shakes the entire area. Arata and his friends are thrown back, but Arata manages to activate his barrier ability in time, allowing them to land safely on the other side. Consumed by rage and wrapped in flames, Kogura demands to know why Akachi did this. Akachi then reminds him of his friend, the woman Kana loved, who died because of him. Kogura is shaken by Akachi's words and, overwhelmed with guilt, drops his weapon, which falls to the ground beside him. Akachi drives his spear into the earth and creates stone replicas of the divine weapons that once belonged to Kogura's servants. He declares that he now possesses them all, and that he will also take Kogura's sword. The blade sinks into the ground, and an enraged Kogura charges at Akachi, his childhood friend. They had trained together once, but Akachi had always been stronger, easily blocking Kogura's strike. He pulls him close and accuses him of betraying everyone. Then, shoving him away, he lashes him repeatedly with whips of earth, saying he won't kill him, but will make him live with the shame and pain of his failure. Despite all of Akachi's cruelty, Arata feels pity for him as he watches. He steps forward and demands that Akachi stop, saying it's disgraceful for a warrior to beat a defenseless man. Akachi notices that Arata is also a chosen one and asks if he seeks the throne as well. Arata replies that there's no point in becoming king if it means killing innocent people to get there. Akachi mocks him, saying there's no place in this world for such foolish ideals. He explains that for every chosen one with a divine weapon, there are only 2 options: either submit to someone stronger or become stronger and make others submit to you. With that, Akachi tells Kogura to suffer in his misery and departs, creating a storm of dust as he disappears. Later, Kagura's loyal servant, approaches Arata, begging him to bring back her beloved master. She says she respected him more than anyone else in the world and believed he could accomplish anything. Thank you so much for watching. If you want part 2, comment part 2 and I'll bring it to the channel. Big hug, and see you next time.